Alright, it's time for another episode of Random Thoughts from a Crazed Mind, the worst video channel on YouTube. It's early morning here in the backyard studio, and look how good my picture looks. Holy cow, my pictures are never good when I'm doing videos. I always do them at the wrong time of day, but there's no sun, there's no shade, so we got a good picture this time. Now, today I'm going to be talking about why the United States is a country full of gun nuts. Now, this is an explainer video. Fair warning. I had 3 jobs. I've been fired from 2 of them. I retired when I was 40 years old. I'm about reality. Okay, people don't like ideas, they don't like what I have to say, and if you watch this video you're probably not going to like what you hear, but it will be reality based. So let's talk about why the United States is a country full of gun nuts. This is primarily obviously being projected out to a international audience. We're all about the world here at Random Thoughts and a Crazed Mind. We're not US centric necessarily. I'm coming off 2 highly successful videos, Gabby Petito and minimalism video. So we're going to keep it rolling. I'm inspired this morning. So, why is the United States a country full of gun nuts? What you have to understand about the United States is the United States is a very religious country. It's very religious. It's founded on religious belief. And being a religious country, we are a country that is full of fear. We've always been a very reactionary, fearful country from our founding, and it's only gotten worse over time. So you can look back, even the Great Awakening. We had a big religious awakening, which was basically just an American freakout. You know, you've seen in recent years, we've had a huge freak out about Barack Obama becoming president. A black man became president. Almost freaked people out completely. You know, we had a big freak out about Donald Trump. We elected a moron as president, and people went completely nuts. They said that, you know, Russia got him elected and all this crazy stuff. Could not come to grips with reality, which was that people just didn't like Hillary Clinton and they did not like the Democratic agenda. So they elected Donald Trump instead. But more than anything, in the United States, we are a very religious country and we love bullshit. We love bullshit. So if you look at our presidents, I mean, look at this: Bush, Obama, Trump, Biden. I mean, come on. We're not even taking our whole country seriously anymore. Just give us the bullshit. So, being founded on religion, our whole history, our whole foundational ideas are based on the bullshit of the American Revolution. Now, even in the American Revolution, I mean, the American Revolution was a bullshit revolution. I mean, you know, if you look back at what they were actually complaining about, I mean, it was hardly anything at all. I mean, what British citizens were really upset about, I mean, what Americans were really upset at was they weren't getting their British rights as wealthy men. All of the founding fathers, all of the revolutionaries were exceptionally wealthy men. And they believed they weren't getting their British rights, their rights as Britons. not as Americans. They weren't really interested in being free from the king. They loved the king. In fact, Patrick Henry, when he said, "Give me liberty or give me death," he was shouted down as a traitor to the king, and he apologized. He said, "Oh, okay, yeah, I went too far." You don't hear that in your history books. And they all hated one another. All the founding fathers hated one another because they were all effete men, all full of themselves. They were all wealthy. They couldn't stand one another, really. But they had one thing in common, was that they wanted to get more wealthy. So they needed to band together to do that, because they were the wealthiest men and they wanted more power. Now, what does this have to do with anything, really? The gun nut philosophy comes from the founding fathers because they needed a military force. So they needed people to have guns so that they could have the ability to create an army. So this became the foundation of American society. But people didn't really care about guns until the 1980s. I mean, prior to the 1980s, gun ownership wasn't a real big deal. But in the 1980s, things began to get really political in the United States. In the 1970s, Democrats, Republicans, people didn't consider themselves to be a Democrat or Republican the way they do today. They voted for Democrats or Republicans, but they did not consider themselves to be a Democrat or Republican in the same way they do today. Today, it's part of their essence. It's part of who they are. I'm a Democrat. I'm a Republican. And it's all that matters to them, because politics is ultimately religion. Politics is more important in the United States than religion. Religion is just the basis of politics. And so that's the thing you have to understand about gun nut mentality in the United States, is it's all based on religion. It all basically comes from the religious right and from the right wing, which is really based on this kind of religious ethos. And because religion is not actually that important in the United States, politics is. Religion is just the foundation of politics. So people who are religious are extremely political. And so this goes back to the founding fathers, is that we don't view the founding fathers for what they were, which were just a bunch of rich guys trying to get richer. We view the founding fathers as being agents of God. And this is the whole key to political power throughout time, is that the king is divine. The king is divine. That's what gives him his power. And that's what gives the power of the Constitution and of the founding fathers in the United States, is that these are men that were destined by God to create the United States, to make the United States a God-fearing nation, and that the United States is the #1 nation in the world because God loves the United States more than everybody else. If you know anything about the United States, you know that. So, when we have the constitutional right to gun ownership, that came to a head in the 1980s when Ronald Reagan really started to use religion and racism as the foundational organizing principle of the Republican Party, and people started to become radicalized politically. And that's when you got right-wing radio, and people really went all in on the religious fervor of republicanism. And then you had Fox News, and then you had everything. You know, it's just become more and more and more. You get the internet, Fox News, everything just becomes more and more and more about politics, which is more and more about religion. Because politics is religion. Okay, people don't really believe their religion, but they do believe their politics. So, that's the foundational reason that Americans are such gun nuts. But the big reason that Americans are such gun nuts is because of television and the movies. Okay. Now, Americans, we regard television as history. Okay. When we watch Gunsmoke and we watch Bonanza, which all of these guys that love their guns grew up watching Gunsmoke and Bonanza. Okay. They grew up watching John Wayne. They grew up watching cowboy shows, cowboy movies, and they were using their guns. And they grew up wanting to be cowboys. They grew up wanting to be John Wayne, and that was who you were as an American. Was all about guns and all about war, and all your heroes wore guns. And this is what makes the United States the gun nut country that it is. TV. Because when people are watching Gunsmoke or Bonanza, they believe they're watching history. This is how things really work. Now they recognize that this is just a TV show, but they think, you know, this is a version of how things worked back in those days. This is how it was. You had the sheriff, you had the good, you had the bad. The good guys had the guns, and they shot the guys that were bad guys. So this is why we are such gun nuts. You know, when you were a kid, if you were living in Italy or Germany, you weren't watching Bonanza, probably. You know, maybe you watched these shows, but it's not part of the religious foundation of your country, the religious fervor of your beliefs about your country, that this is the way that your country got founded, right? We had a revolution, people used their guns for the revolution, then we had cowboys, and then, you know, we had World War II, so everything about the United States is about guns, okay? That's why we love guns in this country, because we've watched it all on TV. And that hasn't happened in Europe. It hasn't happened in other places in the world. Now, you know, probably like in the Middle East in 50 years, they'll want to have machine guns, but in the United States, we're all about, everybody is Little Joe Cartwright. Everybody is Ben Cartwright. That's the way they view themselves. I'm Little Joe. I'm Adam Cartwright. You can't take away my gun. I'm Little Joe. You can't be Little Joe if you don't have a gun. Right? That is America. If you want to know why Americans are gun nuts, it's because they can't be Little Joe Cartwright without a gun. How can you be Little Joe Cartwright if you don't have a gun? You can't. That's why we love our guns. Everybody of that age watched Gunsmoke. They watched Little Joe. All these shows. That's what they grew up on. They grew up on John Wayne. They grew up on war. They grew up on this revolutionary story of how guns, Daniel Boone. Who's the Texas guy? Who do we have in Texas? I forgot his name. Can't think of it right away. Died in the Alamo. Anyway, we've got all of these guys with guns, right? This is, and we believe all this is real. It was on TV. It was on TV. Okay. This is how the world really worked. I mean, we fought the Indians. How can you fight Indians without guns? So, that is the foundation of gun ownership in America. And that's why we have to have our guns. We don't care how many shootings there are. We don't care about people dying in the United States. I mean, that's the way it works, you know? That's the way it is on TV. We've been indoctrinated into this culture, right? The good guy shoots the bad guy. Sometimes, you know, people are going to die. If you watch Gunsmoke, it happens all the time. Innocent people get shot. So, that's the basis. Religion, which is politics. Politics is greater than religion. The gun is the foundational principle of our religion. And since the 1980s, the United States has become a very highly religious society, and its religion is politics. And so, that's it. You know, there's nothing ever going to change about that because it's a religious belief. People believe that guns are part of people's religion. And you know, strangely enough, if you look at the religious right, they're the biggest supporters of gun ownership. My brother is the best example. I mean, my brother grew up in a house with no guns. He doesn't own a gun. He's not going to own a gun. But he's a Republican. He got really religious, and he's a real right-wing Republican, and he believes, you know, 100% down the line, he's right with all this gun ownership stuff. He doesn't care how many people get shot or how many people get, you know, because they've got a story for that, you know. And the story is that if you got a gun, there's fewer people dying, not more. Never going to come off of that. That's a religious belief. And in the United States, we love abortion. So that is the reason that the United States is a country full of gun nuts. It's not going to change. It's a religious belief. It's based on our true religion, which is politics. And now you know why the United States is a country full of gun nuts. And this has been another episode of Random Thoughts from a Crazed Mind, the worst video channel on YouTube. Thanks for watching, YouTube. So long.